My name's Dave Hansen. I am an account executive here at EchoStore. This is today's agenda. So I'll talk a little bit more about EchoStore if you're not familiar with us. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about how to use Kahoot. So it's a pretty interactive webinar that we're putting on here. And then we're going to really dive into what we all attended for, right? The user experience with ServiceNow. So without further ado, I'll explain how to use Kahoot. So really just navigate to the website on your mobile phone and put in the game pin and a nickname, and you're off to the races. So we like to use Kahoot, not just to keep it interactive, but we also will want to collect feedback towards the end. And yeah, let us know what you think of it. So EchoStore's ServiceNow practice grew out of what we were doing for our clients. EchoStore's really been focused on growing organically with our clients and solving challenges for them with technology. What that has meant in the ServiceNow space is we're finding ourselves solving some challenges outside of just the traditional ServiceNow IT service management. So we're being asked a lot to help with return to work, managing the pandemic response for some organizations, doing client engagement, other things outside of core IT service management, and working with our clients to really just extend the value of the platform internally and externally now. So that's a bit about who we are. If you could skip to the next slide. I've been in the service management space for about 10 years and really excited to be here and working with Paul Wydra, Tom, and team, building out a next generation ServiceNow partner. So I'm going to pass it off to Paul. I'll have Paul do his intro and we'll get started.
Thanks, Dave. So hi, everybody. Welcome. Dave and myself have actually been working alongside of each other since around 2013 or so, when we both worked for ServiceNow. So since being directly a ServiceNow employee, we've been in the service management space and entered the partner ecosystem really here at EchoStore to help in best practice solutions of leveraging the platform. I personally am very excited about the platform's growth over the last 8 years or so since I started, really having more conversations now with how the platform can be leveraged for a true enterprise solution. I'm still having IT conversations, but they are becoming more focused now on the different areas of the business as the ServiceNow platform grows. And part of the dedication to the platform, ServiceNow is running what they call a Certified Master Architect program. So if you haven't heard of this before, this is really meant to be the best of the best for going through a 6-month, almost MBA style program for here are the best practices of the platform. Here's how to approach it. Soft skills involved, the technical aspect of the platform, really to come out of that program as the best of the best for helping customers succeed with leveraging the platform. So I'm excited. I was chosen to be part of that program, which I'm currently in, and hoping to graduate in January with a few other members of the cohort in order to provide really the best solutioning, leveraging ServiceNow. So that's a little bit about me, just in terms of ServiceNow background. For today, what we're hoping you get out of this are 3 main items. One being, get an understanding for what makes a great user experience when we're talking about ServiceNow. Learn about how virtual agent should be used, but also how it shouldn't be used, and become equipped with a couple of quick wins you should always consider for really getting user experience and ServiceNow off the ground, and how do you begin, how do we make a great experience with the platform. Nate in the beginning mentioned we're looking to do more of these webinars. Dave mentioned as well, looking to collect feedback. What we're hoping to bring with these webinars is something that other companies aren't necessarily considering or doing. You can Google ServiceNow Virtual Agent. There's a lot of videos out there, but they all seem to be focused on here's how to set up technical aspects of it. Here's how to use the Virtual Agent Designer. Here's how to build the conversations. So I don't want to spend time on how to build the technical pieces because there's a lot of resources on the documentation site for how to actually do it. We realized no one's talking about what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, and really how to leverage the virtual agent, or how we've seen other customers leverage virtual agent. So that's what we're hoping to get out of today's session. So to begin, as Dave mentioned, we'd like to ask you a few questions on Kahoot. So I'll switch over and start this. So again, you don't need an account. You don't need the app. If you go right to kahoot.it or kahoot.it and enter in the game pin code 6250744, we can get you in and start asking a few questions. So I'll give everyone about 30 seconds or so to join in. I am a fan. I don't know if you're hearing it, but the Kahoot music is Halloween themed. So I'm just going to let you listen to that for a little bit. Give everyone about 15 more seconds. And after the game starts, if you're not in yet, the pin will be shown. You can leverage it to join at any time. All right, give it about 5 more seconds and we'll get going. Perfect. So just to start off with a few questions before we get into the actual webinar, wanted to first start off with a poll. I'm just curious, you can select multiple answers here. Who has heard of or worked with any of the below components? So you can select all that apply, 1, 2, 3, or none. So if you've worked with or heard of, familiar with the service portal, the mobile apps, the virtual agent, get a little understanding of your experience with user interfaces in ServiceNow. About 5 more seconds. Okay, great. So we got some familiarity across the board. As expected, a lot of folks are familiar with the service portal. If you've heard of ServiceNow before, it's really the current big thing for a user experience layer in ServiceNow. Of course, we have the mobile apps. The virtual agent is getting more and more popular. And we have some people not too familiar with, so we'll cover on really all these pieces today. So now just curious, when you hear the word user experience, what does that mean to you? Always seems to have a little bit of a definition that differs from person to person, but what does it mean to you? So you can just type in an answer and hit submit, and we'll build out a word cloud. And you got about 10 seconds left. Okay, so user experience, simple and easy, intuitive, great interaction, simple, user-friendly, ease of access. Great. Really, at the end of the day, user experience is focused on simple, I like, great, all have a very common theme. This needs to be easy to use. I need to enjoy using it. And we'll go into some of the specifics of really what makes the great UX. So now, I saw this the other day. Quiz question for you. What's a 2-word term for whom a computer is ultimately designed? I actually saw this on Jeopardy the other day, and it seemed very timely. So a 2-word term for whom a computer is ultimately designed. About 10 more seconds. All right. So average person, human being, end user. What is an end user? So yes, the correct answer would be an end user here. And I think what's important in terms of ServiceNow, it gets a little confusing when we use the term end user in ServiceNow world. We're used to the terms fulfillers and end users, but we have to remember that end user really means I'm leveraging the system. So in terms of user experience, it's really I'm consuming the system, whether that be from the front end as perhaps a requester, or even from the back end as a fulfiller. And so nobody typed out what is an end user, huh? It's guess good thing I'm not Alex Trebek. So a couple of scores coming in so far. A few of the quiz questions, which have a fun game for who's on the leaderboard. One more quiz question before we get into the webinar. So, do you know what a typical user adoption is for a service portal? So user adoption can be a little confusing. We'll get into what that actually means. But if you were to say, okay, how often are users leveraging the service portal? How well does it get adopted? What do you think that comes in at? Okay. So typical user adoption is about 10 to 15%. So a few folks thinking 20 to 50, greater than 50%. And I think what comes into play here is user adoption in a service portal. You can build the prettiest, the greatest service portal, but if you don't have a plan for how are we going to get users to leverage it, or do we have the right channels open for how to best support our users, you might not have the numbers that you're looking for being able to support the users or have the adoption. And that's why it's so critical to have an omni-channel approach, which is what we're going to talk about today. So Joe Mo, jumping to the top. So let's go back to really talk about user experience. So if you want, you could throw your phone to the side towards the end. If it's still up, we'll ask a few more questions, or you can always join again. But let's get into it. I talked about background just in terms of ServiceNow and where I've been, but just to be brief on why am I speaking about user experience? Why is it so critical to me? I've been developing websites since about 2004. So before I got into the ServiceNow world, I did general sort of IT, but I also did web design, web consulting. And although the specifics have changed of what the user interfaces are, the technologies involved, since 2004, since 1995, whatever it may be, the core concepts of user experience have remained the same. So they're continuing to evolve, but the standards are still there. But then back in 2013, becoming a solution consultant at ServiceNow, one of the things I wasn't exactly part of the job description, sort of randomly fell into it, was customers were wondering, how can we use ServiceNow and make it as easy as possible for my users? How can we match our branding? So I ended up doing a lot of portal mock-ups for people who were looking to purchase ServiceNow. So looking at their public website and sort of getting a similar look and feel in ServiceNow. If you know, you've been working with ServiceNow since around 2013, 2014, this was before the days of Service Portal. So it was content management system, if you know the technical pieces there, but really working on how can we best skin the ServiceNow interface in order to make a good experience for users. And I actually looked back the other day, I didn't realize how many of these I did. I did about 50 of them for different companies and prospects who are looking at ServiceNow. So that's what really got me into the user experience side of ServiceNow. Now, I did spend about a year as a customer success manager at a virtual agent AI startup. They did integrate with ServiceNow, but it was its own tool, its own technology. And I really liked the time I spent there because it gave me some insight into how are companies thinking about virtual agents in general, how are companies approaching chatbots, what should that experience look like from a best practice standpoint. So I can really take that and now apply it to the world of ServiceNow, knowing you've got this great toolkit for how to build these experiences out. What is the right approach to take when doing so? And some of you, this may give you a little heartburn, but if you think back to 2013, so when I say the content management system, the service portal, before Service Portal was a product, this was the traditional interface for requesters inside of ServiceNow. You may have seen this before. Even though it wasn't super modern or leveraging sort of the best web technology at the time, I do like the concept it provided for when I'm visiting ServiceNow. Am I here to order things? Am I here to look up knowledge, or do I want to get help? So I do like the concept that they had. And then now this is probably more familiar to most of you, looking at a service portal today, you still have those similar concepts, but of course mobile friendly and more focused on an easier experience, a little bit more modern looking as part of the approach. So before getting into specifics on inside of ServiceNow, I do want to take a few minutes and talk about user experience in general. So a lot of you said simple, easy to use, and intuitive. There's a few different definitions out there for user experience. I do like what is on Wikipedia. It's really a person's emotions and attitudes about using a particular product, system, or service. I really like how this says emotions and attitudes here. User experience is more than just the skin or the look and the feel. It's more than the user interface I'm interacting with. It's that whole experience on my interactions and what I'm getting out of interacting with that system, that service, whatever it may be. Some of you may have seen this before, but if you haven't, there's something called the user experience honeycomb. So this was thought up by Peter Morville. Peter was a name at Google, and back in 2004, he really came up with what goes into a great user experience. And these were the main guiding principles that are so critical to creating a great UX. And this is super useful in terms of ServiceNow for if I want my portal to be adopted, if I want to use virtual agent, what needs to be considered as part of this initiative. So useful. I'm only going to leverage an actual interface or leverage a system if it's useful to me, if I find it valuable. It needs to be credible. So a lot of these components are, am I going to actually, if we're thinking about websites or web systems, am I going to actually visit the system? If I don't have to use it, I'm not going to. And we need to make sure that it's valuable, it's usable, it's easy for me to find. Omni-channel is critical for if I need support and ServiceNow needs to be leveraged, how can I best provide that support to my users? And something else to call out was also accessible, meaning in terms of, am I on my mobile device? Am I on my laptop? But also, am I using a screen reader? Something that often gets forgotten, especially in the enterprise, are I need to be able to support my users if they're using different accessibility devices or items such as screen readers. So ServiceNow, the standards around that are really important for this should be accessible to everybody, no matter how I'm visiting or what means or needs I have. So I took this and really what I consider a great user experience comes down to three main items. First one being speed. Think back to the last website you went to that took more than 2 or 3 seconds to load. You may not know of one off the top of your head. There's this expectation, especially in 2020, for items, web systems need to be fast. If something is not fast, it may be more in the enterprise world. I know the enterprise is always trying to keep up with the consumerized world, sort of the websites you go to as a personal person versus the systems you're leveraging in the actual business. But speed is very critical, especially if you're offering that public-facing website or I need to support. If it's not fast or if it's not simple, easy to use and understand, I'm probably not going to leverage it. And in terms of ServiceNow, what we hear a lot is we have a great service portal. We want users to use that instead of calling us. If it's not a fast interface or if it's not simple and easy to use and understand, I'm still going to pick up a phone and call. Or maybe I'm going to come by your cubicle and ask for help instead of using the system. Another item related to this, and you may have heard this before, it's really a web developer type rule to follow, but the 3-click rule. This is huge when thinking about ServiceNow and how to create a good user experience. I should be able, as a end user, so consumer of the system, I should be able to access what I need in the system in 3 clicks or less. If not, I'm going to have a poor experience and I may not come back to leverage it. We had a customer we were working with on requesting a laptop was one of their most common requests that they got in ServiceNow. And what they found was people were opening up incident tickets, or they were calling in and saying, oh, I need a laptop, instead of using the portal. And when we helped them investigate what was going on, we counted, and it took about 7 clicks to get from the home page in order to get to, I need to order the laptop, to get to the laptop page. So that can really, that was a pretty extreme example. So sometimes it might be 4, might be 5, but really less is more in terms of how quickly can I get to what I need. Otherwise, I'm not going to use it, or again, could be a poor experience there. We've talked about some of these components as far as inside of ServiceNow, what the main pieces are. So I'm sure user experience, first thing comes to mind is always service portal. But as I mentioned earlier, we're thinking end user is the consumer of the system in general. So we also have to consider the default UI, what your fulfillers are using. It needs to be a good experience for as many users as possible. And that's why it's great to see what ServiceNow is continuing to improve upon for not only that front-end user who is a requester or navigating in as almost your non-technical user, but also the more technical users or your back-end users, making sure it's a great experience for them. And we'll talk about some of those components. Virtual agent is key to this. So we'll get into more details on the why. But again, a lot of people prefer this method of, why do I have to talk to a human? Let me just talk to a bot. Maybe they can direct me to where I need to go. And you want to have as many channels available for your users as they as really seem fit. Some users will prefer this route. Other users, maybe more your power users, will prefer going to the service portal. But you got to make sure that you have as simple of an experience for whatever means I might want to leverage. What about forms and fields? Did anybody think about that when thinking about user experience? We tend to find this one gets forgotten most of the time. You can have the fanciest service portal, you can have a sleek virtual agent, but if your content and the forms and the fields and the process that you're leveraging isn't up to par, or you follow the user experience standards, it's going to be a poor experience. Think about a virtual agent where I ask for something and my knowledge base is sort of out of sorts, or the data's not organized and it comes back with a bunch of random articles, or to request a laptop I have to fill out 30 fields on a form. That can all contribute to a poor user experience. So now, thinking about a poor user experience. A poor user experience is typically confusing to the user and they have trouble understanding it. There may be too many words and not enough images, or there is no breakup of the content, or maybe there are typos. Think about typos as an example. Would you trust the website and content you are seeing if the UX was poor? Context is also key in addition to readability. It's also not desirable to include different font types that change the experience. Here's a kitten. User experience goes into more than just the interface. Providing this webinar, providing you useful content for, hey, what should I consider? What do I need to know when launching a virtual agent, thinking about how can I provide a good user experience for my end users? It's really the entire experience, the entire interaction that you're having. So something like this is not really not set up well for a webinar. Honestly, you've probably seen so far, I'm very OCD and even building out the slides, and you got to try to break it up into 3 components or 4 components. This was hard for me to write and not change. My eyes are kind of cringing as I look at it. But it's really powerful. For listening to a webinar, you need to have a good experience for how that content is provided. Now, if we think on the theme of what could potentially be improved or what might not be a good experience, let's consider the knowledge base and maybe the service portal that you might have today. So if you go into knowledge and you type in a phrase, you might get 752 results. And what that comes down to is there's a lot of content out there. It may not be organized in the most efficient manner, but users also don't always know how to use a search box on the service portal. Any of you on the phone who are admins or on the back end of ServiceNow, you've probably seen this before. In the ServiceNow mentality, we know how to use the search box. We know to be very keyword specific. If I need a laptop, I type in laptop. But have you ever typed in laptop and then sort of erased that and typed in, I need a new laptop? That's something an end user could potentially ask for. That's one way the search box could be leveraged, because if you think about the out-of-the-box portal, it does ask, what can we help you with? But that, depending on the keywords that are used and how I'm leveraging that search box, can differ the experience and what's pulled back. So it's not always the best solution to just say, oh, my catalog is great, my portal is great. If you don't know how your user are actually getting to that information. In the use case of that laptop being the most common item, we instead took that and put it right on the front page as a, hey, these are the quick links. These are typical things people are visiting the portal for, to make it that much easier. And we talked about forms and fields. Think about a form where everything is mandatory. It's 27 fields, and then even think about things like client-side versus server-side validation. So if you're not familiar technically, ServiceNow best practices, you want to do as much server-side validation as possible. It doesn't impact performance. It's really, I submit this, let's do some checks and make sure it's accurate. But this is always a fine balance if you think about user experience, because if the system knows as soon as I'm entering something or I move away from that input text box that it's wrong, it would be ideal if that can tell me, because then I can fix it, because I'm sure you've all done this before. You fill out a long form, you get all the information right, you hit submit. It comes back and says, actually, there's an error with this, you need to fix that. Experience-wise, it's kind of like, oh, now I got to go through this again. Whereas if there's a small client-side alert or, hey, this is something you want to consider before submitting, that can really impact your experience. An example we just ran into was return to work. So we're helping a customer with reopening their buildings, and they have the concept of, when I come in as a employee, I'm assigned a shift. Either think about it as I can come in during week 1 or week 3, or I can come in as week 2 and week 4. So those are the two different shifts. And if I go to make a request in ServiceNow to make a reservation, I choose that date. If it's not in my shift and I had to submit and then it tells me, oh, that's not in your shift, that's just not a good experience. So what we did was, if I choose a date and it's outside of my shift, the form immediately tells me, hey, you're in shift A. This is the next date you can choose. This week's not going to work for you. And it's that immediate feedback that really improves the experience, where you want to have that question of, best practice-wise, what's the balance of the client-side validation you should have? Because there it made a lot of sense, and we just made sure it was built properly so there's no hit on performance or page load. But that's a consideration you really need to think about. So I do have an example of a form. This may look familiar to some of you. You may have something like this internally. But this is a customer we've worked with in the past. We've removed any indication to who it is on here. But if you think about a application access request form. So I need access to an application. A lot of companies using ServiceNow do this. They might do it in a different fashion. But let's look at this form. So I'm asking, who's this request for? Contact number, location, email, delivery location, all mandatory. A couple of read-only fields here. First thing I notice personally is there's a lot of, other than there's a lot of fields, requested for doesn't automatically populate. So I'm sure most of your ServiceNow environments do this, but if I open up a form, it should automatically think, okay, it's going to be for you. If you want to change it, sure, but let's automatically fill that in. That's one less click, one less step I now need to do on this form. Second, a lot of this information we just know about the user. So if I choose this is for Paul, we know my location, we know my number, we know my email. The question is, A, do we need to show it at all? And if not, take it off the form. Less is more in forms. Or B, if they need to see it, let's automatically populate it and or make it read-only. So I'm big on following A as much as possible. If I have your contact number, the user doesn't care if you need that unless it's hey, what's the best number to contact you at? So maybe it's automatically populate your main number, but if I want to change it for this one request or something is needed about it, let me edit it. But still, that auto population is key. And then we can get into specifics like I'm asking for application access and you're asking for a delivery location. We don't even need that. So why is that on here? So I would see this as almost all of these fields go away. It's who's the request for, what's your comments, and what's the business justification. As you scroll down the form, it then goes into okay, what type of application do you need? And I then have to choose between sales, corporate, finance, IT. The technical team understood what this means. As a typical user who's just asking for access, think about email. Is that under corporate? Is that under IT? NetSuite, is that finance? Is that corporate? So it goes back to just because you have something organized in a certain way on your back end, consider your users, consider who's consuming this, and are they going to know that? Are they going to get confused? Simple, simple, simple. So as you can scroll down further, we then have essentially a checkbox for each application. Those of you who develop in ServiceNow know checkboxes should be avoided whenever possible. But what these were doing is if I say, yep, I need Workday, then it gives me a list of what roles are available. This is a multi-select box, so I can choose multiple ones. As I went to choose a second one for Workday, I got a pop-up that said you cannot select more than one option. So a lot of things going just wrong. I mean, it's just inefficient here. So having a multiple select box when I can only choose one, just make it choose one. Don't let me think I can do this and then tell me, no, you can't. And then the same with, instead of all these checkboxes, these could be in an order guide and set up a different way. ServiceNow best practice wise, we can make this better. The one thing you're not seeing on here is this form did take about 7 to 8 seconds to load. And all of these items, when I check off Workday and pulling in these, this is all client side loading this information. So it impacts performance. It slows things down. So this is just one example of a real life form that we've seen, and we've helped a client completely, I wouldn't even use the term revamp, we've rebuilt to follow true ServiceNow best practices. But it really starts to get you thinking of how important forms are in part of your process. Because if I had a virtual agent and, I need to submit access, the virtual agent can immediately tell me, go here. So that's a great experience. I was given the answer immediately. But if I end up on this form, not quite a great experience. So I do have a question for you to consider. And if you wanted to put your answer in the chat, I can see if I can see a few and kind of read them out. But consider a website or an app that you absolutely love. It has a great user experience. Can you think of one or two? In my example, I recently went through a refinance. I love Rocket Mortgage. Everything was done from the mobile app. I didn't have to talk to a soul. And even to the point where it was telling me, okay, at this stage, you're at this step, maybe step 3 out of 7. These are the documents you need. Upload this, upload that. That one's done. Great. This is where we need this. E-sign this. And if I ever needed support, I can chat with somebody directly in the app. Or if I really wanted to, I could call, or I can have somebody call me, but I didn't want to talk to anybody. And for closing, they sent a notary to my house with an iPad and said, all right, e-sign all these things and let me notarize that one piece of paper that we need. And I was done that was a probably 25-minute visit to my house. It was incredible. And what's important to think about is, again, the app and the actual interface I'm using is important to make it a great experience, but it's also that back end. I did have to ask a question a couple of times. That chat interface, the response time, all went into making me feel great about it. I tell everyone about Rocket Mortgage. I had my friend going through a refinance. I said, use Rocket Mortgage. It's like, don't even think about it. So really, if you have a great experience, it goes back to the word of mouth, all those items that are critical for user adoption. Now, on the other side, if you think about a website or app you can't stand with a poor user experience, these typically stick in your mind more than the ones that are great. Because if you have to go somewhere, it's a good user experience, it's just normal 2020, oh yeah, this is something I expect. Great user experiences you remember, really bad user experiences you remember. I have a controversial one, Amazon, for a poor UX. I think UI-wise, it's one of the worst websites I've used for actually clicking around. If I have to try to find out how to get help or I need to do something, some things are easy, but overall, there's a lot going on. But user experience-wise, I still think it's a good user experience because of the customer support I get when needed. So it's that back end half of the actual what's involved that goes into a great UX. So things to consider. Yeah, it's agreed about Amazon, right? It's funny. It's interesting because, and maybe they can't make it simple because there's just so much content, so much going on. But it's interesting. Now, a key to adoption for a system. So, in order to get good adoption, you might have heard this term before: stickiness. We need to keep users engaged. We need to keep users returning. A lot of times we're doing a service portal project. Somebody say, I want ServiceNow to be sticky. I'm torn with this. Some use cases, yes, it makes sense. We have customers who use ServiceNow as their intranet, and they're able to, ServiceNow's the front door. I'm doing everything in there. I'm in there every day checking news or going to where I need to. Of course, your fulfillers are working out of it more, maybe approvals or looking at approval records. But some customers, it doesn't make sense to be sticky. Think about a public-facing website versus ServiceNow. Facebook, Instagram, social media websites. They want you to come back, and they purposely give you that feed where you have to scroll through until it tells you, yep, you're all caught up, and then you just put it away, and then 10 minutes later you come back because it'll tell you. They design that so that you always come back. But I think about Comcast Xfinity. I use them for internet. I have their support app. I've used that app twice. When I've used it, it's been phenomenal. I was able to send a refresh signal to my modem. I was able to chat with somebody and get help. But it's not an app that's designed for me to be in every day. And that's okay. That's how I view some of our ServiceNow customers. You're not at a point yet where you want ServiceNow to be sticky. You may get to that point in your journey, and there are some customers where you 100% want ServiceNow to be sticky based on how it's being used today. Basically, you don't want it to try to make it sticky before it's something that should be. It goes back to providing the right content. Is this valuable to me? Or right now, is ServiceNow being used for support? And when I visit it and use it, it should be like the Xfinity Support app. It's great to use, but I'm not going to be there every day. So if we think about the future of user experience in ServiceNow, how many of you have heard of the Now Experience UI framework? Some of you may have. Some of you, this may be brand new. I do highly recommend looking on the community site and the developer site. You can Google this. This is the future in my mind. ServiceNow has gone through, it used to be the content management system. There was UI 14, UI 15, UI 16. Nowadays, you're seeing, the service portal came out. I don't think service portal is the future. That's the here and now. The Now Experience framework is what is behind Agent Workspace. The ServiceNow developer website, if you've been on it, they rebuilt that to use the Now Experience framework. What this is it's true reusable building blocks from a library. And it's also leveraging the latest web technology. So Node.js as an example for this. What was happening was the service portal was great for its time. It's needed for, here's the mobile-friendly omni-channel sort of experience I can create. But if you wanted to create a new widget that wasn't out of the box, you could do so. AngularJS, you can make it look pretty, do what you want to. But a lot of times it was a one-off widget I was creating for a one-off use case. As soon as I wanted to do something similar for something else, I'd have to create another widget. So it had what was needed, and I could use the tools and build what was required, but it wasn't reusable. So this Now Experience framework is really built to be similar to a content management system framework if you've used WordPress, Joomla, Fuel CMS, like all these items where I can take from this library, plug this in, I can build a widget and then make it reusable throughout different spaces. So more to come on this. Keep an eye out for it. The Now Experience UI framework, there is information on the documentation site. You can today, when it first came out, it was very limited for what you could configure or change. But today it is set up where if you're an agent workspace or you're in a certain workspace, you can create your own widgets and add to them. So it's all documented. There's a lot of good information out there on that. Something to consider. So summing up user experience, and then we'll take the last 15 minutes or so to talk about virtual agent. Why do you need a great user experience? I think everyone's in agreement that user experience is nice. It's key. We want to make it as easy to use as possible. But there are real business reasons for doing so. One, employees get back to work quicker, more quickly, depending on your grammar take there. I looked it up, both work. If we have good user experiences, the task of me going through my job, working on my task, getting help, I'm able to do it quicker. I'm able to now get back to work faster. I'm able to be more productive. I'm also happier. If there's good user experiences, I'm a happy employee. Think back to your onboarding experience, whether it be at your current company, at a past company. Was it really good? Was it really bad? What we actually find is, and especially how ServiceNow approaches onboarding using ServiceNow, if you had a bad experience, you might not hang around at that company too long. Especially the workforce changing, I think maybe more of a millennial aspect into there, but it's a concept of when I showed up at EchoStar as an example, it was a fantastic onboarding experience. Got my laptop, but more importantly, got access to what I needed. Some companies, you might get your laptop on day one, but 2 weeks later, you still don't have access to all your core applications or systems you need. And then maybe 6 months down the line, you realize your manager's asking you to access some application you've never heard of, and you don't have access to it yet. So again, more of the experience and the back-end processes to support it. But a great experience for onboarding can go a long way for keeping employees happy, keeping them, enjoying the systems that they're using as part of their job. Also, call deflection. Better the user experience. Comcast Xfinity support app as an example. I'm going to use that instead of calling the next time to get help. Fun story. I presented this a couple of weeks ago, and I had a few people in the audience who didn't know what that was. So I should probably switch that to a mobile phone these days. But I also had to consider, I don't have any phone that looks like that in my house right now either. Okay. So now I want to talk specifically on the virtual agent, show a quick demo. I'm looking at the clock. Dave, as I'm switching over, I'll just check with you. Are there any questions that have come in that you want to throw over my way? If not, we will keep rolling.
One question that comes up is that it actually comes up pretty frequently. So once it's built, right? What's an adoption strategy that you've seen to build awareness, build excitement around the new user experience?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so we will talk about that. I actually have a couple slides on that, but at a high level, the adoption plan is critical. And what we find is having a bot and saying, go ask it anything, like, hey, we have this virtual agent, go ask it anything. It's amazing to see the types of questions you will get. And if it's not built for that, it all goes back to the adoption plan for how are you going to market what this does. Does it help with support? Is it for IT? Is it just for password reset? We've had customers who they spin up a virtual agent. All it does is password reset, and it does it great because that's the expectation set with users. Use this to reset your password. So we find it's a poor experience if it's just a go ask it anything. You got people asking about the weather, and although it's something simple and could potentially do it, wasn't designed to pull the weather. Why are you asking it that? Because of the wrong expectation. So great question, but at a high level, that's how we approach adoption plan. We'll get into more details. So when we're thinking about virtual agent, what we typically hear is we're looking to improve the human experience when interacting with my group. This could be IT, this could be support. Want a lesson on who fields those initial calls, those initial support Can we lower costs? If you think about an outsourced help desk and you're paying per unique contact to the help desk, there's some obvious cost savings for call deflection and for not getting so many calls sent to L1. Because in theory, if I'm talking to the bot and I figure out, oh, I have a problem with this database or this network issue, or outside of IT, maybe I'm having a problem with this product and I'm using the virtual agent for, it can direct me to level 2 automatically without that initial support team needing to do so, saving time, saving money. Typical success criteria that comes along with this. So business outcomes: reducing cost, reducing workload, improving service, faster time to resolution, which is great. And those are all typical outcomes to adhere to. But a lot of times customers get lost around, well, how can I track this? What are the metrics involved? So really our suggested metrics around success go into two things: customer usage and user experience. So the usage being, all right, how many users are leveraging the bot? How many are retained? So if I use the bot once, do I use it the next time that I need support, or am I calling instead? So repeat users, number of sessions. And then user experience wise, are times being improved? So first response time, time to resolution, people who interacted through the chat bot versus went through calling help desk, were there faster times involved? One of the biggest aspects of this is always the survey. I mean, the survey is always funny because you need a good user experience for your survey to ask about user experience. What we've done best is the 3 emojis, right? The sad face, the neutral face, the happy face, or the thumbs up, thumb middle, thumb down. And if they want to provide more information, let them provide it. But part of this into the virtual agent is also asking, did this help you? Was this useful? Because you can leverage those metrics just as part of the normal interaction they're having with the chatbot. So when we think about the why for virtual agent, the first and foremost for most companies, it's a great opportunity for, kind of made up a phrase here, but we dubbed it the fake chat. A lot of companies are trying to do chat. If you're not properly staffed for handling chat, it may not be received well. The unfortunate thing in how it's set up today is in ServiceNow, it's very easy to turn on chat. It's very easy to turn on live chat, right? But the problem is, if you're not staffed for that, it's that expectation again. When you go to Amazon, when you go to your bank's website, you get on a chat queue, if you're not answered in 30 seconds, maybe a minute, you're not going to wait around. You're going to call, you're going to do whatever comes next. So you need that same setup. And what we find is if your team's already at capacity and they're handling requests the way they are, and now you got to add in chat, that's not going to grow well. It's really for where you see success with live chat is typically a dedicated team. So virtual agent is a great way to start with, hey, use our chat bot, because it feels like a chat experience-wise, and they're getting help, but it's from the virtual assistant and not from an actual live human. So things to consider. Each topic is an experience. The best bot is conversational whenever possible. You want to keep it short and combine answers into one response. If you've used Virtual Agent before, there's an audio beep or a tone every time a response is sent. You can disable that, but I view it as in Slack. Somebody who doesn't use Shift-Enter or put all the thoughts into one post and they send me 10 messages in a 30-second time span, Dave is guilty of doing this. It's super annoying because you just get the message after message after message. So same with the virtual agent. Keep answers concise, but also try to organize them as best as possible into smaller responses. It's okay to redirect to a form or a knowledge article, but it's better if you can actually answer the question in line, go ahead and do it. And then if you consider things like, did this answer my question? False positives, meaning if I answer, it looks like the bot helped because it answered with a topic, it could have been the wrong topic. So things like this can't always be avoided. So what's best, and part of the rollout strategy, is start small with the number of topics. Think about your top call drivers. Are people calling in about password reset? Are they calling in about asking for a laptop? Make sure those are addressed, but don't overcomplicate the process. Because you only get one shot at an answer, and if you don't get the right answer, offer connect to an agent, offer open up a ticket, but make sure you're getting that feedback. So for just about 2 minutes here, I want to show a quick example of an out-of-the-box virtual agent conversation, and then talk about what works well or what could potentially be improved. So if we think about show me everything. So this is sort of an out-of-the-box chatbot. This is a good amount of topics to have. Less than 10. Think about if I had to scroll through this, that's a lot of potential for false positives or wrong answers that we're giving out as we're learning. It's better to crawl, walk, run when implementing virtual agent. So if we consider I'm having an issue with email, this is useful. What type of issue is that? This is exactly what someone on the phone would ask me. So if I'm having authentication issues, here's a few things I can try. Okay, reopen the email client, username and password didn't work. Did that work for me? No, it didn't. The bot is now going to say, okay, look in the knowledge base. Here's an article that might help you. The Clips config for Android. Not even close. Did this resolve your issue? At least it asked me that. But personally, I would have given the answer. Did this work for you? If not, skip this. It needs to be give an answer, and if it's incorrect, give them the opportunity to say, no, that was incorrect. All right, let me connect you with someone. Let me get you some help. Don't try to just keep throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks. That's not a good experience. So I would get rid of this. Did any of this information resolve your issue? No. This should immediately go into, let me open up a ticket for you. Because now it's asking, oh, do you want to open up a ticket? I don't even care anymore. I'm just going to close this out. So there's certain things you want to consider, and it all goes back to those guiding principles. Keep it short, make it conversational, and provide one answer, and then let them say, if this was incorrect, let me connect you to get help. One of the most common scenarios we see or original concerns or thoughts is the virtual agent will completely eliminate the need for connecting to an agent. Not the case. Ideally, you're deflecting as much as possible, but if the agent doesn't answer the question and connects you to support, that's still a win in my book, because you're still getting that user the help that they need. And now there's some information in the ticket we can provide. But just remember, connecting to an agent or offering for assistance and then the user saying yes, that's not a bad thing. So just taking a look at the clock, really what I wanted to end on was the right approach, and then ask a couple of questions on Kahoot if you still have time. The best way to approach virtual agent, and this gets back to the question that was asked, Dave, start with a pilot. Pilot to 1 or 2 groups. Make sure it's a non-technical audience. Start using the system, collect feedback, then use that to create a phase 1 rollout plan. From there, incorporate the feedback. Take that information. Again, here you're started out with maybe those 3 or 5 or 7 topics. Don't go too crazy. And then just confirm or expand those topics if needed, but still not more than 10 I wouldn't recommend. Because this is just really small audience, larger audience. And then does it make sense to expand to Teams, Slack? What is that adoption plan? Really vet that out. Roll it out to more groups, and then potentially do the larger corporate rollout. And then it's a continuous feedback and topic improvement. It's very similar to the knowledge base. Once you publish something, you can't assume you're just done with it forever. Got to continuously work on it, continuously make improvements. The same should go with ServiceNow and your virtual agent. So from today, some key takeaways for you. Really a great user experience encompasses any way an end user interacts with ServiceNow. You want to start small with virtual agents, set the right expectation for the rollout. This is what the bot can help you with. And with every requirement, consider what the end user experience will be. So I only have a couple of minutes left, so I did want to ask a couple more Kahoot questions before we wrap up. If we can jump back to Kahoot. So if you're still in it, if you can grab your mobile phone and reconnect into the Kahoot session, or if you need the pin again, it is at the bottom, 625-0744. Give you everyone a second or two to get in there, and we'll jump into the next question if you don't mind. So true or false? When you want a better user experience in ServiceNow, that can only mean a better service portal. True or false? About 15 more seconds. All right. So false. When we're thinking about user experience, there's a lot of components, not just the service portal. A little bit of change in the leaderboard with Eric on top now. So another question, what ServiceNow project should include a focus on user experience? So when we're thinking about CSM, HR, mobile, or all of these and any of these, where should we focus on UX? Okay, so for ServiceNow projects, great, all of them, all of the above. Always, always, always consider user experience. So I know we are at time. Last question, if you don't mind. What's a key takeaway that you have from today's session? Are you going to talk virtual agent, or what have you learned? You could just type in free text for what a takeaway is for you. Give you about 15 seconds. Okay. So key takeaways. Awesome. VA is awesome. UX is key. Easy. Learning more. End users. Start small. Evaluate. Yeah. So if you're going through your journey, we love talking about virtual agents. More importantly, how it ties to user experience. It's not just how can I make a chatbot. So definitely feel free to ping us, ask us questions. We would love to get involved in the conversations and help you sort of navigate that conversation internally. So thank you for participating in the Cahoots. Again, that's helpful feedback and information that we'll leverage for future webinars. With that, I know we're at time, we're a little over. So if there are any last questions, or Nate, I'll pass it over to you to wrap up.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Great stuff as always. Appreciate everybody jumping on today. We'll be sending out an email to everybody with a recording of the link uploaded to YouTube probably tomorrow once we get that all settled. So look for that. You can share that with your teams and look over as necessary. Additionally, if you guys do need anything, feel free to reach out in any way, shape, or form, and we can help you out. So once again, thanks all for joining. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Dave. And stay tuned. As we said earlier, we're going to try to do a lot more of these throughout the rest of 2020 and into 2021. Thanks, everyone.